Charles, I think I've told you the story about how when I was a little kid, I was terrible in school at spelling tests. And I
Hmm.
remember one day my mother telling me, "You've really got to learn how to spell." And I thought to myself, I don't think I will. Computers weren't really out yet, and you didn't have spell check really, but I was kind of right. Unfortunately, Adobe Photoshop does not include spell check, and today's episode is supposed to be called The Delusionist. But just before
No,
we went
no,
went on air
no.
here, you've
We agreed it was
yeah.
going to be the Delusionist. You forgot. You're getting
Ah,
old.
well, yeah, I appreciate you
Well,
covering for me, but that's a typo by
again,
me.
never explain, never complain. I mean, I think if we think about the recent episodes and this idea of Republicans never get a break, but Democrats get every break in the book, in the media. If the president of the United States were a Republican and had been accused credibly by Tara Reade publicly and then in a book that was supposed to come out right before the election, and remember the current cause celeb is that the Hunter Biden laptop stuff was suppressed. What was suppressed, in addition to that, was the Tara Reade book that was set to be published and distributed prior to the election. Tara Reade being the Senate staffer who credibly accused Joe Biden of creeping on her, or worse, not only groping her and attempting to have maybe sex on the side of some hallway somewhere in the Senate, but then when she made the when she didn't comply, according to her, Biden said, "You're dead to me," and the office basically ripped on him at a time. Remember, in 2020, we're talking about the Me Too movement being considerably advanced at that stage. We're not talking about 1992 when it was okay for James Carville to say, drag $100 bill through the trailer park, and you never know what kind of trash comes out when they're talking about Paula Jones. Whenever it was he made that comment. So the accusations of bad behavior and handsy or worse behavior against Joe Biden are quite credible and long-standing, and involve many incidents on television and elsewhere where he has done things to little girls on air that frankly are beyond creepy. They're just things that a normal male, well-adjusted male, forget about a senator or president, vice president, would never dream of doing in private, let alone on television. Most recently, including saying to some girl, grabbing her in the shoulders in some event out west last week and saying, okay, no serious boyfriends until you're 30. What kind of a comment is that to have to some perfect stranger girl on air by the president of the United States in 2022? So I, respectfully
Well,
say,
Charles, real
Jason, and we had
quick,
a
one thing
go
about
ahead.
that comment. Because Joe has made those comments before, and while they're always tasteless, when it's a comment made to like a 9-year-old girl,
Right.
it's a joke. The girl that he made the comment to most recently, look, she was about 20 or something. She certainly was of like, teenage dating age with her peers. And it just becomes super awkward for a really old guy who's not her father or grandfather to talk to a adolescent or teenage girl like that about anything sexual at all. It's just so ridiculous.
It is. I mean, it truly is. And, in my family, my niece was the first Ortel, last named Ortel in our line of John B. Ortel, the man who came in 1853 from Germany. It was the first female born in our line since the 1800s. And I had, the privilege of raising and being the primary custodial parent of my second child, a daughter, when she was 9. And I had the benefit of a nanny, and I took great pains to respect boundaries that you should be respected when you're raising a daughter. I mean, this is outrageous behavior. And where are all the Me Too people who are making up tales about Brett Kavanaugh and many others through this Supreme Court confirmation process? Where are the people who say that you have to have decorum on January 6th and elsewhere in dealing with elected officials and Supreme Court justices? Where are they now in looking at the way this, frankly, this disgusting creep is behaving? And at the same time, these stale allegations being made against Donald Trump and Bergdorf Goodman by a ridiculous person, frankly. I mean, I don't know if you've ever been to Bergdorf Goodman's. I have, back in the time frame they're talking about, and the notion that you would be engaged, it's like a tomb in that store. It's very quiet. And the notion that you would have been, it really is. It's just like everything is extremely expensive. And,
Yeah.
if you, there's no way that this kind of activity took place. The woman has already, beclowned herself on television back in the time when she first made, Jean Carroll, I think is her name, when she first made these charges. She was on television, somebody asked, did you ever fantasize about being raped? And she said, "Oh yes, I'll often do that." I mean, this is not credible in the case of the allegations, many of them against Trump, but in the case of Joe Biden, he is a delusionist, and I think that's a good artistic, you know, what a sortie, not an error, an artistic sortie that happened. Was put in there by the gremlins of Photoshop. I think it's absolutely appropriate, especially when you also think, it's not like this is just a brush fire. This is one incident in the case of Joe Biden. No, he raised this creep, Hunter Biden, who he claims is the smartest person he knows. I mean, does Joe fantasize about impregnating hookers and, going out to the Marmont Hotel in wherever it is in Los Angeles and going on these coke-fueled binges? What of the allegations may be false that when Joe was younger and a senator, that he might have been at Studio 54 and doing crazy stuff as well in his 30s? I mean, there's a lot here that's very badly wrong, this picture about Biden. And, I think the mainstream press, frankly, is in the delusion business. They've sold us a whole bunch of delusional theories. And they're now trying to walk them back because I think people are waking up, partially because of of the Tulsi Gabbard phenomenon, that we have a new, fresh, shiny face, female face on the block, PR-wise, who's dissing the establishment. And dissing the establishment is a very popular thing to do especially when you're younger. It's a way to seize attention and maybe power. And here's Tulsi Gabbard doing that. And now we have a whole bunch of walking back of all kinds of things. I don't know if you saw the breaking news about Barack Obama, Jason.
That he said they're buzzkills?
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, he was on some absurd podcast. I mean, you and I have done, I don't know how many hundred at this point. Are we up to 600 yet? We're certainly past 500,
maybe more
podcasts, or more. And we've tried several occasions where there have been, three of us on air at the same time. This is a podcast with four hosts, and that just doesn't make any. I don't like going on established television with three and four people at once. It's just, or no, let alone the format, the five, where everybody's talking over one another. And here's Barack Obama appearing recently on this thing that's getting all kinds of play, where he is criticizing. I think what he's saying is right, actually, which is, God, lightning's going to strike me through my apartment walls here. But he's absolutely right to say, as he had said, as you age, you understand that people are necessarily imperfect and they make mistakes. And here's him saying, listen, stop, landing on everybody everybody makes mistakes. Get over yourself. Nobody's perfect. There's no such thing as a true virtue. And he's admitting in this thing, which is kind of, rich, that, quote, when I get in front of a microphone and start acting professorial, I make mistakes. Really? You think so? Because you've never actually been a professor. You were at best a lecturer. You barely understand the Constitution. Any serious discussion we ever have involving Barack Obama is flatly wrong. I mean, let's go over his record for a second here. I mean, he certainly, I'll give him that. Yeah.
It's called
he's
Pod Save America, and it's hosted by. Wait. This is
this
okay. So
is
wait a
yeah,
minute. This is weird. It says it's hosted by former Obama staffers John Favreau, John
right.
Lovett. I mean, isn't this the famous director, or this is just two guys who coincidentally have the same name?
They have the same name. These are four
Okay.
guys who are the Vitor. There's another one. Four of them. But the point is, to have four co-hosts, it's crazy. But beyond that, here's Barack Obama, and for once, I did in the time when I was writing for the Washington Times, I did an article I was particularly proud of at the time in 2000, whenever it was, talking about the fact that one of Obama's greatest mistakes was failing to stand up for NEDA, who was the poor, the protester, the Iranian female protester who was shot to death in those 2009 protests. And Barack Obama did nothing, worse than nothing, in standing up. The people of Iran were ready to shake off the malocracy, the corrupt malocracy, and this great big regime change artist refused to I'm not in favor of regime change, but here the people were out there, much as the American patriots were out there in 1776 and afterwards, and the French stood up and helped us. And we owe, in history, if you go into it, Americans owe a huge debt of gratitude to the French for helping us become independent. And when they were doing it in their narrow self-interest, but they helped. So here's Barack Obama saying, I made a mistake in 2009. Well, thanks a lot. It's now 2022. We're 13 years later. It's even worse in Iran today, thanks to you. The other thing you did is you made a gigantic mistake sucking up to the insurance companies and selling Obamacare as anything other than a gigantic subsidy for the insurance company and the malpractice lawsuit industry and everybody else. Instead of bringing the cost of healthcare down, you created this absurd scheme which gives you a card saying that you've got coverage, but when you try to pay for it, you go bankrupt.
Well, not only
So I
that,
mean,
Charles, far fewer doctors,
right,
except like what happened in New York. This is very different because I was talking to some people who live in more remote areas. They had reduced options for insurance. In New York, where there's obviously a robust market, several new companies opened. And at the time I got insurance, it was a lot less than what I had. But now it's not that many years later, and it's more.
right. I mean, when you go through the kind of exercise that I think people are starting to go through now, and you look at the cost of government, 2007 and 8, and George W. Bush and his father are guilty of escalating that cost. So I'm not making an anti-democrat per se argument. I'm an anti-big government guy, anti-big bureaucracy guy. And when you go back and you look at how expensive government is, how unresponsive it is, how ineffective it is in this country and around the world, that's where we need a true, not revolution, but a change in practice. Big government, big anything just doesn't freaking work. And so here's this rube getting out and making these comments. He's all in for climate change, but he's got how many mansions at beachfront level?
Right.
Why would you be seriously against try and promote the problem of climate change and then go out and spend $12 million on yet another beachfront mansion in Martha's Vineyard? I mean, obviously, you're either an idiot when it comes to buying real estate, or you're an idiot when it comes to the cult of climate change. And so, what's significant to me about this is Barack Obama doesn't do anything, nor does any former president do anything, perhaps with the exception of Trump, without carefully considering the implications of what he's doing. So to come out and make these kind of comments criticizing really a very vocal part of the Democrat base, the people who would glue themselves to the wall and the museum there in England. I know they're not
With the
Democrats,
tomato
but
sauce or whatever.
yeah, the Campbell soup hurlers. If you're going to
Terrible.
take on those sorts of people in your base now, less than 4 weeks before the election, the internal polls are probably telling you that the current platform of abortion and it's all about Trump is crapola. It's a shit sandwich. And this guy's come out and he's saying, no, wait a minute, we need to course correct. I don't think you can course correct. And if you were going to course correct, the last thing you would do, if you were intelligent, is to go down to Georgia and stump for Stacey Abrams, who truly is delusional, and Raphael Warnock, who's probably changed his name from Warlock. Of all things, the state of Georgia has just announced that they are investigating Warnock's charity. So here you are running the Barack Obama grift mill charity. You're going to go down and stump up for Stacey Abrams, who's an election denier when it comes to her own election. They're now looking into payments being made by her PAC to completely unqualified family members, which is so the standard operating procedure. It's a standard operating procedure around the world. And it's not just a black thing, it's a corrupt politician thing all over the world.
Look at the ironic name, Charles.
Sure, I know. It's really atrocious, especially when you look at, I mean, you've built several businesses. You know how tough it is without venture capital backing to go out and conceive of an idea and take on the established world and build up a business. You don't start paying yourself a salary of $120,000 a year in a startup. So how do you go ahead and pay a family member $120,000 out of a PAC or out of a charity for that matter? How do you go in the Clinton Foundation, to pick on them, which we will do at some length again in coming days and weeks and months? I mean, how do you go and take out a very expensive office space in Midtown and then give a suite of offices to your bratty Raggedy Ann daughter, Chelsea, the diarrhea expert? And how do you justify doing that at the expense of a charity? I mean, if you want to do it as the Clinton family, go rent an office and pay for it with after-tax money. But you certainly, I mean, Chelsea Clinton is as qualified to be vice chair of a serious public charity as some bum in Washington Square Park, playing the trombone. At least you can play the trombone. Chelsea can't do that.
We've got something of a diarrhea lab in Washington Square Park. Perhaps the Clinton Foundation could get involved, and maybe there's a public-private partnership there.
Well, it's funny. I was when I was having my coffee talking this morning, I didn't mention it, but there was a whole bunch of trash left over, including there was a protest yesterday in Washington Square Park, probably a satellite initiative of the Clinton Global Initiative Foundation, saying where the placards read, "Birds are not real," and I've seen it. I've heard about it. It's a bunch of whack jobs who believe that birds are either robots or devices being used by the bourgeois to keep the masses. I mean, these are people who should smoke more crack. But back then, though, on Biden. Go ahead.
There's very little coverage of the birds aren't real protest. Here we've got Freedom News TV. I mean, come on, this is just stupid. What is this about?
Again, there's so many. What I think we're seeing, if we stay, for example, on Barack Obama, he's trying to correct the record now and say, okay, cancel culture is bad, and we can't say that we're always right, and we're not necessarily virtuous. We make mistakes too. Wait a minute. That just, that just destroys this whole woke movement. That, if you got blue hair and you went to Vassar and you majored in gender studies and you're in a not-for-profit now, stopping people on the street and asking for money, you're virtuous and everybody else is an asshole. I mean, the second you throw that out, what are you left with as the Democrats? And so
Charles, look at this for a second. I'm sorry to focus on the birds aren't real, but we need to just pay a little attention to this for a second. So they're saying birds aren't real's tax returns? Is there something missing here? Like how does that make any sense? Bar money? This person, here's a counter protester says birds are real. Come on, this is obviously set up to just make the protest look stupid. This can't be an actual.
Again, I think when we go back over this period, you talk about Operation Paperclip. People go way back into history and they say, well, television was used to sell narratives. And maybe it was. Maybe television was used to brainwash people. But very clearly, the combination of these elite academic schools, the availability of scholarship money if you're really poor, and student loans if you don't have the cash to pay for it currently, and then the fact that in these supposedly elite universities, it's really not the professors, but it's the teachers' aides, often they're graduate students, who will decide. They 60 papers in a given class, and the 5 A's or 25 A's or whatever it is. If they only go to the politically correct people, then you can very easily see. And if you could only get a job at a decent place, if you got an B or plus B or higher average, then these crazy wokesters have a lot of power to pick winners and losers. And then once you go into these different whether it be BlackRock or investment banks or media, you name it, if the selection process is not fair, but in fact socially engineered, you can see how fiction would be sold as fact. And I think that's
I'm
really
glad you
the
just
message.
mentioned social engineering, and I'm sorry to interject, but again, we're using some network protection features to give me a delay. I don't know if you saw, Charles, the article pointed out that this Birds Aren't Real group is a parody, and they're making fun of conspiracy theories in general. So this demonstration in Washington Square Park yesterday, this is social engineering to just make people think, oh, any outlandish thing being protested is ridiculous. So people who say that COVID vaccines are whatever they think they are, they're just trying to disparage anyone who tries to counteract a primary narrative.
Right. So we go back. If we go into if we go way back, and this is surface level analysis, but go way back to the period before World War II. An overwhelming majority of Americans were against entering World War II because the experience, the dread experience of World War I, where the casualties were a lot worse for America than they were in World War II, led many to say, enough of these foreign wars. We don't need any of this shit. It really costs us. And plus, they were in a depression back then. So we get, engineered into World War II. Some argue that Roosevelt and others behind Roosevelt basically manipulated us in first to supporting the British and then to getting very active involved after December 7th. And we could go into all that at great length, but let's not for a second. We then, quote, win. We sell the victory in World War II as the United States alone bearing the brunt, when that was not the case, when Russia suffered many more casualties than the United States did, orders of magnitude more. And then we sell the post-World War II period as a period of American exceptionalism where everything worked well. And then the Soviet Union and implode. First Berlin implodes, then the Soviet Union implodes. At the same time, China decides to adopt a form of capitalism. India shifts from socialism towards capitalism, towards India Inc. And we're in this zone from 89 forward where we start to embrace this idea of globalism, that America can lead the world again, and that maybe there should be some form of globalist government, and that companies, American companies and other organizations should go international. And maybe there should be these wise people who are guiding the global system, and maybe there shouldn't actually be a formal government, no accountability, but let the Rockefellers, Gates, and other people promote this idea that globalism is good and nationalism is bad. And look where we are today. The world has way too much debt. We have, various and sundry idiots suggesting that, this maybe the use of a tactical nuclear weapon over Ukraine is not that bad a problem. And, maybe what we should use this now, the World Economic Forum says, this situation and where Russia is cut off supplying gas to Western Europe is maybe good. That'll just shift our adoption of renewables that much more quickly, which is a bunch of stupidity. And then you have Bill Gates, you have up there trying in recent days to say, this is saying something slightly different, but I read a piece where Gates and his people were saying, well, when COVID came around, we I suppose it really was kind of like flu, and maybe the people who were most exposed to it, like flu, were the elderly, and we didn't think enough about that back in 2020. What are you talking about now, Bill? You don't get that kind of a mulligan. You locked the world down. As we said early on, the damage, particularly to school age kids, young school age, as yet unsocialized children, being locked down at the very beginning, they become conscious and they try to interact with people. The psychological damage to those kids is going to be, we will not be able to see that damage for decades. And
Yeah.
the actual damage that has gone to the confidence that people have in our healthcare system is incalculable.
Yeah.
And so there are there are a series, I would argue, of fables that have been sold to us that are now coming crashing down before our eyes. I believe that the internal real polls, the ones that are done by people who are not talking about it in the media because the poll numbers are so bad, where people say, hang on, in 2022, isn't it true perhaps that so-called independents, people who are not affiliated with either party, are actually likely to vote in 2022 now? And shouldn't we be constructing polls that reflect their views? Independents drawn from people like me who were registered Republicans who are now independents, people like you maybe who were registered Democrats who are now independents. The independent group, I would argue, not just because I'm in it, is a much more consequential group in 2022 than it ever was before. And then within the established parties, you have real problems, revolutions, frankly, going on in both parties. You have in the Democrat Party, you have that, and really now he's completely lost it, Bernie Sanders. He said today on This Week, I think on ABC, he said that he will not accept, Bernie Sanders, the idea that government spending is responsible for inflation. Okay, fine, Bernie.
Oh,
Start raising llamas and knitting because you're a fucking idiot. Of course, when you
alpacas are
spend
better, I think, Charles.
whatever,
And
when
just
you
quick
spend
correction, I was trying to interject there. I don't think I was ever registered as a Democrat. I've just said previously that I have voted for Barack Obama.
okay, but people, there are people like Tulsi Gabbard who were registered Democrats who, in fact, ran for president as Democrat and have just announced that they're no longer Democrats. So, so within the Democrat Party, you have, the communists, the progressive, the hard left people. They're very disenchanted now, as we saw with the recent constituent meeting in the Bronx that was noteworthy for a
Oh,
number of
yeah.
reasons involving AOC. First, because there was basically nobody there. Second, because
Well,
you
except
know
for people who
it,
wanted to yell at her.
right, and I would argue that it's a bad move to set a meeting up where the stage is lower. When you use a classroom and the stage is lower than the audience, you tend to
Right.
look bad. Whereas
Powerless.
if you, right, you look weak, and particularly when there's nobody in the audience, and there are these different people. I think it was a setup that different people yelling and screaming at her first one, and somebody else joined in, and before long, the audience was applauding the idea that AOC is part of the establishment. And I think Gabbard's emergence as an independent force is making it cool, frankly, to on the left to state that.
Right.
And so on the left, in the Democratic Party, I think you certainly have an enthusiasm gap. I mean, who can get really excited about rushing to the polls to vote for somebody whom Joe Biden supports or Jill Biden supports today? I mean, I'd rather vote for leprosy. I mean, on the left, and then on the right, you have this Goomba, Paul Ryan, who is now, it turns out, vice chair at Teneo, which is a grifter machine for both parties, set up by Doug Band. He's vice chair, having been Speaker of the House under Trump, having put a knife into Trump in the first 2 years of his presidency. Now, this idiot, Ryan, who's a career hack politician on the board of Fox, I might add, is going around saying that Trump will never be president of the United States. Now, maybe that's true, but he was the president of the United States, and you screwed him, Paul. And as far as Paul Ryan has been dead to me since he came up with an idiotic plan. I think it was in 2011 that I was asked to comment on Bloomberg, and I just tore it to shreds on television just after he came up with it. I mean, Paul Ryan is in thrall to the deep state. He should shut the f up. He should get a real job. Maybe he should move back to Wisconsin, become an assistant football coach at some high school. But he is he is promoted way beyond his talent. And people like him and Mitch McConnell and others in the Republican Party are one of the reasons, or some of the reasons, that I left the Republican Party. I have no interest in backing a Ryan and McConnell. And I think in the Republican Party, there's definitely, pitched battle going on now between those who believe people who've served in both parties for decades are worse than ineffective. They're damaging the interests of retirees, of private sector workers, of children, of students, and they need to be turfed out and sent into the real world, not to work as lobbyists, but to try to earn a decent living. So, lots going on, Jason.
Absolutely, Charles. There were a bunch of other stories that we were talking about. Did you want to go to some of these?
Sure, that's a good one. One sec.
So yeah, this
I gotta have some more Smirnoff vodka. I'm actually having water.
Of course.
Yes. Yeah. So get on. Apparently, Hannity was on Friday night. People claim he might have been drunk, but
Really?
here in Connecticut, that's a state where there's so many people who are retired government employees or actual government employees, and people don't really vote actively in Connecticut. It's a small state. Blumenthal is married to one of the families that owns a big interest in the Empire State Building, so he's got a lot of money. The guy, I think, Gilbert Gottfried would have a hard time running because he's still dead. But if he were alive, I think he could probably beat Blumenthal. At least he's funny. Blumenthal, I think Trump referred to him as the senator from Da Nang, or Da Nang Dick, because Blumenthal invented this. He was engaged in stolen valor. He was inventing military accomplishments when he basically was like Buttigieg, nothing. Buttigieg, I think, was a chauffeur in Afghanistan. But Blumenthal was even worse than that, saying he was was in combat when he never was. And
how does anybody expect that to not get figured out, Charles? It's the stupidest thing you could do.
Again, there's so many people who are. Look at Joe Biden. I mean, he recently said, it's almost unfair to pick on him at this stage, but he is doing so much damage. I feel I have to. I mean, he said that his son Bo died in Iraq. Now, what he may have meant to say is that while serving in Iraq, Bo may have been exposed to cancer-causing, whether it's burn pits or possibly the munitions that were used in the Iraq War, and that he subsequently died in Maryland of cancer. I mean, that's what really happened. But to say that his son died in Iraq, he didn't die in Iraq. And Biden, the New York Times had a story that talking about Biden's embellishing, his folksy style of embellishing. This isn't embellishing. This is flat out lying. The guy doesn't know. I mean, if you took the guy aside without any handlers and said, all right, no butlers, no maids, no Secret Service, no chauffeurs, the guy wouldn't show up for meetings. He wouldn't even know what he's doing. Right? And seriously, this is a guy who's completely lost. He reminds me, sadly, Washington Square Park is, for those of you who've never been there, it's actually it can be quite beautiful in the summer, in the spring, in the fall now with the leaves changing. And oftentimes you get a lot of people, wealthier people, who have their nurses or whatever, who attach them to their walkers and walk with them, make sure they don't fall down, sit them down on a bench, and they look at they feed the squirrels and they look at the birds and the children and they have a good time. That's Joe Biden. And again, I have no problem. People who are old, even people who have some problems, mental problems at their age, oftentimes have valuable perspectives. But Joe Biden should not be president of the United States right now. He should have resigned long ago. I hope that when, as and if the election proves out the way I hope it will, and there is utter repudiation. I mean, Blumenthal loses in Connecticut. You are talking not about a red wave, you're talking about a tidal wave. If he actually loses, he's held, I think, as a solid Democrat in these polls, solid Democrat keep. If he loses, if Patty Murray loses in Washington, if the different seats that are out there that are supposedly safe go in Arizona, for example, to a Republican, and you start seeing it's not 51 or 52, but 55 or 57 or 58, and the House swing is more like 50 or 60 seats in an honest election, which we may not have, then Joe will announce shortly thereafter that he's not running. And if he doesn't do it, Democratic Party elders and backers will say, we're not paying for Joe Biden to run again.
Yeah. Joe Biden actually would be good in Washington Square Park. He could hang out in the heroin section playing chess with those people.
Chess. He'd play chess with the women.
Checkers.
He wouldn't be able to play.
Yeah.
No chess. Put his hands on their chest.
He'd be playing backgammon. They'd be playing chess.
Right, probably, yeah.
What game is this? Down. What am I doing here? Oh, man, come on, the thing.
Yeah. Where's the ice cream? Joe, it's freaking cold out. Nobody's eating ice cream. But Carrie Lake, there's somebody, Carrie Lake, I don't know if you've seen her yet. She's running for governor in Arizona. She's a a former television host, anchor, and she's tough. I mean, she's good. Very good on her feet, very sensible, and doing well. You can go to Uncle Fester in Pennsylvania. That's not going well. You can talk about Herschel Walker in Georgia. He apparently did very well in the debate with that idiot Raphael, I call him Warlock, who is not a sympathetic character by any stretch of the imagination. Now, again, who knows? I mean, I think we discussed the last time I was on my successful, in theory, registration as a voter here in New York City. I was shocked by the fact that nobody actually checked anything in the process of signing the application. Now, maybe afterwards they're going to check the information I put down, but
doubtful.
Yeah, I don't know. I do sense, though. I mean, I think we talked about it on the phone, but not on air. At this time in 2008. Now, mind you, I think it was around 2000, may have been 12 or 13, October 12th or 13th, or right around then, maybe it's the 7th, that the House failed to pass a big rescue package, and the market tanked in percentage terms far more seriously than it has this year at any time. And there was a sense that John McCain was hopeless. It was never going to win. And so it seemed to be in the bag for Obama at that point. And I noticed around then, walking around as I did then, that there were signs everywhere in the village for Obama, everywhere. It was for, Obama in big letters and Biden in tiny letters, but generally it was for Biden. It was for Obama. It was his time. It was a cathartic moment. We were going to have our first African-American president. He looked very promising. I'll give him this. He did run for his people, and he did run a very successful and smooth campaign. It was very well done. And then reality bit after the election, and with his speech at the inauguration, his non-speech, and with his policies, which were disastrous for the economy. But you're not seeing any of that right now. There are no campaign. I haven't seen a single campaign poster anywhere. And I walk almost every day. I walk, I'd say, almost 10 miles a day. And I see nothing. I don't see people with buttons. I don't see campaign posters for the Democrats or the Republicans. You're not going to see Republican campaign posters in Manhattan, I don't think. But and apparently the serious, I think it's Real Clear Politics or somebody like that has just pushed New York State as a toss-up at gubernatorial level.
Wow.
So
It's interesting, Charles. It seems like politics have changed so much in the United States in such a short period of time. I mean, everybody who's been watching the road trip knows that I was recently in Los Angeles, and I saw a number of old friends, and we never ever used to talk about or think about politics in any way. And I mean, I didn't get into any kind of argument with any of my friends in LA, but it was quite clear that they're aware that I'm not the, Democrat loving, do whatever medical advice they tell you. Like, there's a little bit of walking on eggshells going on, even with people who were very good friends of mine. And a lot of people have told me that they've lost friends over the divide that came about when Trump became president. It just feels like it's gotten much, much worse.
well, yeah, I mean, when you go back really as far back as 81, 82, we've been in a 40-year period where until recently interest rates have gone down and stock prices have gone up and asset values have gone up. So anybody that, whether without borrowing, anybody that had the cash to buy an asset has probably done better, done well. And if you really were aggressive and you borrowed money to buy real estate, you probably done until recently very, very well. But when things change, as they have changed, and now interest rates have soared. I mean, the 10-year rate, which uh, when we started on this, 10-year interest rates were down around 1%. They're now 4%.
Seems
And
like a lot more.
it's a big change, and it's still not high enough because I would argue inflation
Whoa.
is probably, yeah. Look at that,
But
and
that's
and
only since
it
January
right. Well,
of
go
this
back,
year.
yeah. So I mean, this kind of a change,
Hmm.
it puts a hurt dance on you, and when you go back to 2007 and before that, you see that the 10-year rate was, if you go all the way back to like 82 to 2007, it averaged about 7.5%. And so under Obama, I would argue, to make Obama look good, the Fed said, all right, let's just put it on the floor and do that for a while. And now we're in a place where, yes, they've risen in nominal terms, but inflation is still, 8% or higher. And so if you can borrow at 4%, but the value of an asset in theory is going up at 8%, you're happy about that. That's called negative interest rates. And you can't responsibly have negative interest rates as long as we've had them. Because after a
Hmm.
while, somebody says, you know what? F the dollar. We've got to find something else.
Hasn't that already happened with Putin and China and India saying, "Hey, we'll take rubles for gas"?
Again, that's talk. And what most people don't have assets, investable assets. So they don't think like this. But around the planet, the stock of wealth is, even though it's been depleted, is much, much higher than the stock of than the amount of annual output. So the annual output of the planet is, call it 80, 90 trillion a year. The stock of wealth, known wealth, that nobody really knows, the true amount of wealth is a complex thing to think about because, how do you value an old master painting in a depression? How do you value
Right.
when
Keanu
things, when
Reeves.
it's a gang? Well, yeah, I mean, it's tough to really think that through. How do you value real estate which can't be moved? Once the United States crashes, if I'm not saying we go to bankruptcy, but let's say we can't borrow the way we're currently borrowing. So the stock of wealth is, call it 500 trillion, or maybe it's even more than that. And the amount of wealth that's being shifted into currencies other than the dollar is probably not that high because, as bad as our legal system is, at least we have 200 years of precedence. and we have a very deep market, which, even with our troubles, it's a lot deeper than the euro. It's deeper than the yen. It's certainly deeper than the pound, and the ruble, and any other, and the yuan. So for the moment, I think talk about replacing the dollar with something else is just that. It's cheap. But we're not far away from a place where people will say, you know what? I'm George Soros. I'm the bond vigilantes. I'm now going to start betting against the dollar. Now, I don't know if
All
you're
right.
able to get U.S. Credit default swap quotes while we speak, but it would be interesting to see what those show. U.S. CDS. And we may not be able to get them with the graph, but
I think we can.
okay.
Oh yeah, we were looking at this thing the other day.
Yeah. So 2150 in 2007, in the first quarter of 2007, they were 1 to 3 basis points. So 21 is not good.
Wow.
It's not yet it's not certainly crisis level, but
but look at this. It was all the way up here.
When was that?
In 2017. 22. Trump really bought a lot of this stuff down, didn't he?
Yeah. Yeah. How high is that? I can't read the scale as I'm not close enough to the screen.
So this says looks like 23.3 was the high over here in 2017, and now it's at 21.5.
Still, that's way higher than 1 to 3, which it was in 2007 before the credit crisis. So, I mean,
in April of last year, it was 8.9, which that seems like a dramatic increase in a little more than a year.
Right. And you could see this number go to 100. You could see it go to, even higher than that.
What would that mean for the average person if that just everybody is defaulting on their loans?
Well, I think, what's going on now is the situation is so fluid. I mean, J.P. Morgan, Jamie Dimon, who I wax, warm and cold on Jamie Dimon, but I'm liking him Friday rather, Thursday night, when he dropped a gigantic nuclear weapon on Larry Fink at BlackRock, and argued that I think he said something like, nobody gives a fuck about ESG. And I think he's right, because I think the principle of environmental stewardship and good governance and sustainable management of Earth's resources, those principles make sense. But the credit system, the marking systems that Fink and others have popularized don't accurately reflect those noble goals, and instead are used to pick winners and losers amongst the politically active multinationals who should not be wasting any time in politics. They should be focused on economics, delivering returns for shareholders, making sure that their employees are productive and performing well and having decent careers if they succeed in advancing the company's goals. That's where they should focus, not on politics. Let individuals focus on politics, not people who are supposed to be stewards of wealth. So ESG.
Charles, was this the testimony that Dimon was doing? He was questioned by Rashida Tlaib, and she asked if the company would continue investing in fossil fuels and told people to take their money out of the bank, and he said it would be a disaster if we did that.
No, he did do that too, but more recently on Thursday, he gave an interview saying that it was in Zero Hedge, saying that we're in a war, and quote, nobody gives a fuck about ESG. And in part, that's because ESG funds have been a disaster. I mean, some of the most successful, high flying stocks in 2022, and there are not many of them because the market's down in 2020. That's it right there. Is some of the most some stocks that are really doing well are coal producing stocks, of all things, and fossil fuel stocks are doing well, and Beyond Meat is not doing so well, and so
the guy bit off somebody's nose. Beyond Nose is going to be their new product.
And they're taking Beyond Meat out of Burger King stores and stuff and McDonald's. But
Are they?
I think so. Yeah.
Are they going to
Yeah.
start using real meat for the first time?
That's, well, who knows if they're actually even doing that at McDonald's, but
Well, Charles, isn't that a referendum on fake meat that if people from McDonald's are rejecting it, that's different than if somebody who could afford to have a filet mignon for lunch rejects it, isn't it?
yeah, yeah. And I think this whole, I mean, I understand people who say, well, okay, I don't want meat of any kind, whether it's fish, fowl, beef, whatever. I'm not going to eat that. I'm just going to eat vegetables. Well, okay, let's think about that for a second. The process of raising vegetables often involves fertilizer. How is fertilizer produced? Where does that come from? Do the vegetables just walk down from farms in upstate New York and Pennsylvania and New Jersey into Union Square, or are vehicles that are
That's
using
right.
whatever employed to get the stuff there? And how about washing them? How does the water come out of the hose? I mean,
Right.
are there any utilities involved? And what do the utilities use to produce the power? Are they perhaps using fossil fuels? So when you go through this manic cultism, and then sit down and think, all right, well, what was possible? What was made possible by fossil fuels? Prior to us having fossil fuels and automobiles that were gasoline powered vehicles, let's say you had a heart attack or appendicitis in White Sulphur Springs, Montana, and you were my great grandfather who would run for one of them who would run for Congress, or double great grandfather, I guess. No, great grandfather, who'd run for Congress twice from Montana, and you get appendicitis at age 42 or 3 on a fishing trip near White Sulphur Springs, which is kind of remote. The only doctor in town is too drunk to operate on you. And there's no way to get you easily from this town to a real hospital, and you die. So,
Mm.
when you go back into it, I'm not really sure that the arguments that have been made against fossil fuels are as robustly correct as the blue-haired maniacs who would cancel us for arguing that fossil fuels are perhaps something we got to think about make.
It's Charles. From my point of view, fossil fuels are sort of a. I mean, this is the yin and yang of life, right? We've said it. It's you can't make an omelet without breaking eggs. The fact is, to sustain the number of people that we have on Earth and to provide food and homes and all the things that we all agree that we need and want, we got to burn something to produce energy, whether it's to make electricity or to turn wheels on your car. It's I mean, we've spoken about this ad nauseum, but it's just so clear to me, I kind of have to say it again. Having the energy production plant as close to the vehicle as possible, like inside it, under the hood, is absolutely, just in general, the most efficient way to deliver power. When you send it around on wires and store it in batteries, each one of these processes actually forfeits some of the energy. Whereas if you have a very efficient motor in a car that's burning gasoline efficiently, and I've said it many times, I've seen technologies across a range of manufacturers that if they were all combined could create an amazingly efficient internal combustion engine that if somebody did a true, honest, full, lifetime of ownership study, I have a feeling it would be more efficient and produce less pollutants than most electric cars.
Well, I think I told you, I don't know if I told the audience. If I did, forgive me for repeating, but I was taking my father to a doctor's appointment, and we were in a cab coming back, and the cab driver had on, WBAI radio, and they were interviewing this idiot who had written some book about sustainability or whatever. And he was one of these guys who was not a scientist, who had he's a philosopher king, and he had these ideas about making the world. And he was saying that in his view, what we need to move to now, we need to eat less meat, no meat, and not just no meat. we need to get off commercial farming. So none of this mass producing vegetables the way we do it, no fertilizer. We need to get into the idea of eating bugs. And as far as travel is concerned, in this august idiot's viewpoint, what we need to do now is travel less and live in these pods and just be happy with that. And I'm like, that's really stupid, fucking stupid, dude. And I don't know how you got a WBAI, but if you're running for office trying to shove this crap down the throats of Americans, you're going to spend the rest of your life in a pod, not going anywhere, eating bugs, and everybody's going to be laughing at you because you're really fucking stupid and you should not even think about running the world. Yeah, and here's Bill Gates. I mean, maybe that's his problem. He's got like colonies of bugs living in his stomach, which is why he looks as ridiculous. He's
using the same makeup person as Trump. He looks terrible. I mean, he always looks terrible. Charles, one of the healthy kind of whatever food channels and things that I look at on YouTube, I forget exactly who it was saying that there's some, organic compound in all bugs that's indigestible by humans, and that it's fundamentally incorrect that we should be eating bugs, that things like chickens eat bugs. And it went into talking about how a chicken digests a bug and how it has this thing that we don't have. And that this is like cavemen or whoever first saw a chicken figured out you could eat that. And somebody who ate a mushroom and died, they were like, don't eat that. Eat that. They didn't have science, but yet they figured it out over thousands and thousands of years. Chickens eat the bugs. You eat the chicken. Have a leaf. Have a carrot. In my opinion, I'm not eating bugs. I like chicken.
Well,
I like beef.
Yeah. And the thing of it is, I mean, perhaps one of the good things that has happened, if we now start thinking for ourselves, is what people need to understand is that true experts on a subject, often spend so much time being an expert on their narrow field of expertise that they don't have the understanding to really function normally in society. And you can listen to an expert opinion, but it's you, the expert doesn't just say, okay, eat this, not that. You make a decision what to put in your mouth and what to swallow and not spit up. And if anything good comes out of this, it will be that we take experts off pedestals. Yes, we should listen to them, but people need to understand you are responsible for the decisions that you make, not the expert, you. And so you need to listen to an expert, but take what they say with a grain of salt. And oftentimes the smartest thing to do is to let a bunch of experts debate one another, a real debate, not the kind of stuff you see on mainstream corporate-owned media, but a real debate where people throw things at each other when they get mad about a topic, because oftentimes experts disagree on issues that are fundamental. That's the nature, as Tucker points out, and as we've discussed. The scientific method is the continual questioning of your conclusions. You don't just study something, reach a conclusion, and then say that's correct, and I'm never going to revisit that in my entire life.
Right.
There's no such thing as settled science. You look at it, and a bunch of experience happen, and you say, okay, it seems today that this does make sense, and there are certain things that appear to be absolutely true. I mean, one vivid way to think about that, I remember as the son of a nuclear physicist, the first time I got exposed to physics at elementary level in school, there were theories that there were protons, neutrons, and electrons. That's it. Now today, the same physicists say that there are all kinds of different particles that we didn't know about.
Subatomic particles, right?
Right, we didn't know about. Yeah, and this is science. You're constantly rethinking and changing what you think, and hopefully improving your acuity and the power of the analysis that you put forward here. But this laziness,
Charles, doesn't it make sense that there would be no limit to the minuscule nature, just like somebody invented a microscope or whatever and said, hey, wait a minute, there's this electron here. How do we know if you don't zoom in 10,000x on an electron that there's not a billion particles inside there that we're just not able to see? Exactly.
And here we are, one of the major problems with human beings is our conceit, that the way we think about life is through our own eyes, with our, in theory, our own brains. And we imagine that what we have concluded must be true without stopping to think that, maybe the universe there is no such thing as a universe. Maybe it's a multiverse. Maybe it's tremendously older and larger than we've ever thought about. Maybe it's like the process when I first, back in the early 80s, got my big TV, in the days when you had VCRs and you had, these video shops, and we'd go in, Clarissa and I and friends, we'd go to our weekend at our weekend house and invite them over, and we go to the video store. We rent 30 movies and, a bunch of cartoons and movies, and we just try them out. Like this movie, you give it 5-10 minutes. It sucks. Take it out, put another one in. Maybe that's what life is all about, right? You go back.
Maybe we live in a simulation, Charles.
In the hit. Well, maybe, but I'm saying that perhaps everyone who says the universe is 3 billion, 10 billion, pick a number, old, maybe it's just a current chapter in the evolution of life. Maybe that's just, there's a universe for a period of time, and then things go wrong and it blows up and you start over again. And I don't know. But the point is that when we think about Dr. Birx and Fauci and Redfield and these people who sent us down a certain garden path, when we think about Gates and others who are so sure of themselves, when we think about all the people who said Obamacare was fantastic, I mean, we can think of the people who are the World Economic Forum, promoting unregulated globalism, the neocons who say nuclear war is winnable, the folks who've encouraged the United States to be in a forever war state. We can go down a long list of experts who are fundamentally wrong, and the wider population, would rather just either, if you're crazy, I don't know how you cook a Beyond Meat burger, but if you're not crazy, you go to your local store and you buy, whether it's a burger or a hot dog, or if you're rich, a steak, throw it on the grill and, talk to your family and friends and have a big old time arguing about sports.
Charles, did you see this idiotic op-ed in Rupert Murdoch's rag, the Wall Street Journal, last April?
Look at the guy's article.
Crapsey.
He's from the Crapsey family, but he changed his name because he was tired of explaining it. But Crappy.
Isn't Crapsey some kind of... It's an American documentary written by that guy who did the show about Son of Sam. And it's an examination. Crapsey is some kind of monster. 3.3 stars, I think. That thing got.
Right. But
trust this Crapsey guy.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many of these people, and I think the viewership on mainstream television, it's dead. I mean, even on Fox, even the most popular show on Fox is Tucker, and it would be amusing to go and do an actual analysis of the ads on Tucker. Right? It's not this, the Nobel Institute and this fantastic company that has revolutionized the world. It's balance of nature,
and cheap pillows.
Right, balance of nature, my pillow, your slippers, bent crank disease, this crazy ass medicine, tunnels to tower charity. And when I see all that as a business person, what I see is that as much as I do like the first 15 to 30 minutes of Tucker every night when he's on and not there's no replacement host, the fact that all he can do by way of advertisement is get these suspect companies in there tells me that the business model for Fox is not robust. I wouldn't waste any time watching Joe Scarborough and his idiot second wife, or the MSNBC crowd or CNN. I don't have any time for that. The markets are functioning because the advertising market is saying, we can't find real companies that want to advertise to support this crap.
Yeah. Meanwhile, YouTube tells me, this is not suitable for advertising, but we're going to advertise on it anyway, so we'll make money off of you.
Yeah. Well, I hope that we're headed, again, we're only scant weeks away at this point from the election. We don't need to guess. We will see, assuming we survive all this, and that crime doesn't escalate out of complete control in New York and wherever you are,
Isn't it
wherever
already there?
I mean, to the point where there's, walk out, you can't go out your front door without a bulletproof vest. I don't think we're quite there, but we're close. The point is, we're
I
going to
got the
find out.
vest.
Okay, we're going to find out who, in theory, wins, and whether we're, in for 2 more years of a Democrat-controlled, Schumer-led Senate and Pelosi-led House, or whether that we see daylight and we have a chance in the next 2 years to try to have serious investigations of Hunter, of Biden, of the Justice Department, the FBI, the IRS, the politicization of all that. And we have 2 years for the population to get much more engaged and throw these bums out and say, listen, Joe, take what's left of your spurs, go to a place where you eat vanilla ice cream, the 12 hours a day when you're awake and not the 12 hours a day when you're taking naps or sleeping. If we're lucky and we get through this, then maybe this long national nightmare will be over, and we can start really taking off blinkers, continuing to throw out the idiots who are on corporate-owned television, as has happened to Jim Acosta and is happening to many other people. And maybe we can get back to a more normal life here in this great country.
Wow. Charles, we're just looking at this crime in NYC YouTube channel. Holy crap. 56th Street at 3:33 a.m. 3 men broke in and took jewelry, just with a sledgehammer. It's out of control, yeah. Charles.
I know. And people are,
this is just all today. Shooting
right,
victims.
Right. Across the country, you're seeing this, and people are leaving these cities. And, this idea that Eric Adams can get up and say, this is the greatest city on earth. We just need more resources.
I mean, yeah, he needs a membership to the Soho House is what he's saying.
Right. Well, he's going to hopefully get a membership to the No Ho, No Bro House. Get the hell out of here. Go back to wherever you're from.
Yeah, Eric Adams, really disturbingly stupid guy. Yeah. We had a few more stories here, Charles. Now, I may have miscalculated because I thought, well, first of all, let's talk about this. So Elon Musk has backtracked. This was yesterday or the day before, saying that they're going to continue to fund Ukraine internet service. But I don't think he was backtracking. I think that Elon Musk is the type of guy who has a much bigger plan than he's telling you at the time that he says it. And I think that we're going to hear more about what's going to go on with SpaceX, Starlink satellite internet and Ukraine. The hell with it, even though Starlink is losing money and other companies are getting billions of taxpayer dollars, we'll just keep funding the Ukraine government for free. That's sarcasm, obviously. He's not saying he's going to do it. He's joking. Well, and he's pointing out that Joe Biden and his administration are sending billions to Boeing, Lockheed Martin. These are competitors of SpaceX. Well, he's pointing out how the Joe Biden administration is shunning Tesla. And why is that? Is it because they're not playing ball with the ridiculous globalist plans to send GM's best technology to China and just gut out the entire United States?
Well, I mean, on the defense contractors, they get multi-year contracts to get tens of billions of dollars for providing all kinds of services and products into the military establishment. So I think the question of what's going on in Ukraine, if Trump were leading this, you can be sure that everybody in the press would be saying, "Oh, why are we funding Nazis in Ukraine? What's really going on here? Why are And so the coverage of the debacle in Ukraine and the fact that we're going down the very same, not rabbit hole, sewer that we went down in Vietnam, with mission creep, with failing to decide, failing to define what America's national interests are in all this, and what constitutes victory and what constitutes a checkpoint where we say this isn't working and we're stopping. We've done none of that again. We have armchair warriors in both parties spoiling for a fight with the country that has the largest stock of nuclear weapons in the world, and which does have vital national security interests in Ukraine. We don't. And
Yeah.
so,
The other thing that I wanted to bring to your attention, perhaps this is where I've miscalculated. I had intended to go to this trial, but haven't been paying as close attention to it as I was previously because it's starting tomorrow. Twitter versus Musk trial is still on.
yeah, again, I haven't really gotten absorbed into that on the surface level. While the stock is up, it's not anywhere close to the offer price. I don't think the offer
The
price
Twitter
makes,
stock is up.
yeah, I don't think it makes any sense. Well, stocks in general are down. Tech stocks are down the most of anything, but I don't see why Musk is doing this. I don't understand why he wasn't more aggressive against Twitter. I don't think Twitter has provided the kind of information that a normal bidder would demand. I mean, this is almost 10% down from the bid price, 8% down.
Well,
That's way too
let me ask you
far
this,
down.
Charles, because I follow what you're saying. I understand why you feel that way, and I agree. It's all valid. But the question for you is, do these anomalies cause you to believe that Elon Musk must be stupid? Or do they cause you to believe that he's got some plan that's not yet clear to the rest of us?
No, as I've said all along, I think that the answer to these anomalies lies in reading a lot of legal documents, which I don't have the time to read right now. And I don't know what he actually signed up to when he said he was going to buy Twitter. I don't know what the outs are. I don't, and those are often buried in minutia in documents, and you'd have to spend a lot of time thinking about it to understand it. I don't understand why he didn't actually walk from this piece of crap deal. I don't get it. And so,
Well, that's what I
you
mean.
know,
I feel like there's some other purpose here that's not entirely clear. I mean, Elon Musk, the reason I keep saying people are like, oh, you love Elon Musk. I don't. But I have an understanding for what it's like to have an idea that is well beyond the state of the current art of whatever it is that you're working in, and that may in fact be so advanced that other people can't understand it even when you explain it to them. And I feel like even Musk is way further into that camp than I've ever been. And I've experienced that talking to people about 3D cameras, the other things that I was trying to develop that they either didn't understand or said would be impossible. And until it's there in front of you, you're just like, oh, now
right. That's possible, but it's also possible that Musk's lawyers missed something in the way this deal was cobbled together, because there is, I mean, from the whistleblower testimony that is public, multiple whistleblowers, to just the stuff you can see yourself looking at as surface level documents on Twitter. The thing's a pig. It's a financial pig, and this is
technological pig as well.
And we're not, this isn't too dissimilar, 2022 October, from call it February of 2000, just as the internet bubble, just before the internet bubble burst into oblivion. And when you 5420 times the number of shares outstanding is, I think, $40 billion is serious money. To pay serious money for a pig that has not really ever lived up to its financial potential, going back to the IPO days, looking at where it IPO'd, where it was priced, where it closed the first day, where was the market on that moment, where's the market now? I mean, this thing is a financial disaster, and there's so much suspicious activity around Twitter. I mean, nobody really understands who's using it, how the advertising model works,
who's running it,
and yeah, is it fun? I enjoy going on Twitter and posting, and I get utility out of it. Not like financial utility, but I'm able to expose my viewpoints. That's helpful. I'm able to reach out to other journalists and people who are in the public eye and elsewhere on Twitter. So I value that. But I've never paid one penny, nor do I intend to to use Twitter. And really, what I hope will be the subject of great debate is something I've talked about in the past with our viewership. Just as under Mike Bloomberg, and I'm not in favor of this, in New York, restaurants were forced to go and say every item on the menu has so many calories. And I don't know if the calories are necessarily the most important thing to think about when you consider eating,
Right.
but it's one thing. You should, when you are given a choice to, quote, subscribe to Twitter or Gmail or Facebook or whatever, you should be told at the time you're offered this chance, look, we estimate that the value in financial terms of what you're going to get via free email is one example. If you're an active user, meaning that you send more than umpty-ump emails per year, is so much per year. Please understand that the fact that we're going to comb through your emails, we're going to use the metadata to develop a profile on you that will be very valuable spread across the user base to potential advertisers, is worth 100 times the value that you get out of it. Do you still want to do this? But no, they don't go down that track. And the regulators don't go down the track because social media companies today are among the biggest backers of political candidates around the world. And so,
Charles, let's take a look at this for one quick second, because I think this is important along the lines of what you were just saying. I didn't realize this, but I had this notion that up until the this is the NIH telling us this, up until the late 1960s, there was little information on food labels to identify the nutrient content of the food. From 1941 to 1966, when information on the calorie or sodium content was included on some food labels. So, I mean, it looks like, I'm trying to find when this was passed, but about 1969, I mean, do you remember a time when food that you would purchase at the supermarket did not list the ingredients and what was in it? I mean, imagine that. You could start buying some cereal and say, hey, this is delicious, and then you realize it's got crack in it. It's kind of ridiculous that somebody can sell you a product without giving clear information about what it is made of and what risks it might pose to you.
Let alone, I mean, the population in this country is aging. As you age, your eyesight worsens. It's a fact of life. And when you look, when I was registering, to vote, I couldn't read the print. I mean, it was tiny, tiny print, smaller than this print is on the screen right now, on a printed piece of paper. I mean, you should have to print out in 14-point font. Yes, young people complain about that, but if you can't read 14-point font without glasses, you've got a serious reading problem. But instead,
well, it's an eyesight problem.
Eyesight problem. Yeah, my father, for example, has at his age, 96, has all kinds of medications he's taking, and he's a scientist, so he likes to understand what's in it. And the pieces of paper that come with these medicine bottles that explain what's in it. I mean, you can't read it if you got perfect eyesight and you're 18. It's you need a microscope to read it, and that should all change. I mean, you should be forced. And not only do you need to explain what's in some of these products if they could potentially hurt you, but you should be forced really to do the tough thing, and that is to explain it in 250 words. And then if you want more detail, like one printed page, if you want more detail, you want to provide another 10,000 words, fine. But to a consumer who's trying to decide headline level, do I want this or not? If one of the likely results of using Viagra is that your head is going to fall off, and I'm not saying that's true, but I mean, I'm just trying to make a point here.
Tell you that.
You might say like, I'll sacrifice, performance in one department to keep my head on straight, right?
But Charles, they kind of do that in those commercials. They say like, "Oh, are you, tired and worried about the future? And you might have general disorder.
Right.
One of the possible side effects of this pill is death." So in your 250 word example, they just be like, take this pill to help your restless leg syndrome, but you might die. It would be like, excuse me, could you elaborate on the death part?
Right.
You need a longer.
Right. So but going back then though to social media and to Twitter and Facebook and Google and other things like that. I mean, I really do think that the regulators have proven completely ineffective. And one thing we have to admit, and you're seeing it now across corporate-owned media. We had that guy whose last name was Epstein, I think, whose wife said that it was his opinion or his wife's opinion that social media could swing an election by a significant margin. This is back in
Oh, no.
2016.
It wasn't his opinion. He did a detailed study.
Right.
And presented empirical evidence.
Right. So the notion that elections can be swung should be gospel, should be settled science. I mean, we see that around the world, not just in this U.S., but around the world.
Whoa.
There are many. Yeah.
Did you see that tweet from this guy?
Yeah, I did at the time he put it out. So that was in 2020, prior to the lockdown, I might add.
It's a very attractive January for a scientist.
In fact, easy.
Guy.
Just because you're a scientist doesn't mean you can't have an attractive wife.
I mean, like a nerdy old guy.
You're dissing my mother, and yet you're dissing my mother, and you never even knew her. So, anyway.
Oh, there you go.
So, and my mother was quite beautiful as a young person, but
not dissing at least Mrs. Ortel at all.
That's okay. Do that on my show. That's fine. I'm kidding. But anyway,
Charles, let's talk for a minute about Joe Biden's ice cream trips, where he's telling everybody that the economy is strong as hell. Come on, man.
Well, can you pull up that "Welcome to Hell" Rowan Atkinson video so people can look at it?
I think the internet at the hotel is unlikely to want to play a video, but let's see, Rowan.
I'm not suggesting you play, not saying you play it, but just so people will easily be able to get to it. There it is. Welcome to Hell. People can see that and why it's actually very funny. There's a short version and a longer version of it. But if
it's on his own YouTube channel.
Right. So if I were more than 829,000, I don't know. He's Mr. Bean. He's awesome. But the idea that in selling something, you would use the hell word. I mean, hell, as far as I'm concerned, it's infernal and eternal, but the thing it certainly isn't is strong. And to say that, our economy is strong as hell, I mean, you might say our economy is strong as Arnold Schwarzenegger in his prime. Oh, maybe not. Our economy is as strong as steel, maybe.
Also would.
But to say it's as strong as vanilla ice cream or is Hunter Biden's ability to resist temptation, it's just ridiculous. And also, I'm sorry, what is it with ice cream in this guy? I mean, It's cold right now in the East Coast. I mean, why are you rushing as an almost 80-year-old man to have ice cream? I mean, I don't get it. But I just don't. I don't get it. Ice cream it's a reward. Why does this guy deserve a reward for running this country into the ground? Right?
Maybe it's like when you have an annoying kid, and to shut him up, it's just like, here's ice cream.
No, you don't give. No, you don't give them ice cream because that amps kids up. When you have a bunch of kids, the last thing you want to do is give them sweets. I know.
Well, how much is this ice cream? This is Nancy Pelosi flavor. $20 for ice cream?
Well, did you see the other thing that he was out? He was saying I forget what he was saying. It was pretty stupid. But he made some point as he was getting tacos, and he spent $60 on tacos. Now, I hope he was buying tacos.
No, wasn't that the guy who said he went to Taco Bell and because of inflation, it's $28? People are like, dude, what the hell are you eating for lunch? $60 at Taco Bell, you could buy the whole place.
Punch in Biden and tacos. You'll see what I'm talking about. He on this recent swing out west, he was making some comment, and at the same token, he was paying $60 for tacos. Now, tacos shouldn't be that expensive. It's not like it's
Wait, but this is L.A. Is this the article you're talking about?
Yeah, it could be.
Tacos 1986. So that could be some kind of gourmet taco place.
But he spent $60 on tacos.
Yeah, this is the other day. He's
Yeah,
paying it
$60.
forward.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah,
Vampiro?
I mean that just looks like a fast food place. It's not some like organic grass-fed taco. This guy
Right.
should be the new vice president. He's way more capable than Kamala Harris. He would definitely straighten out the border, just go over there and tell everybody to walk back over the line.
Right. Yeah, I mean,
Is
really,
Biden going to sniff this guy?
I don't know. I
Oh,
just,
that's great. A skull sticker on his phone.
yeah.
Charles Joe Biden is an absolute disaster. I don't know what to tell you about that. The only other thing that I really wanted to talk to you about was I saw this last night. We had an opportunity to discuss it briefly, but the co-founder of Trump's social media company has now sought whistleblower status because he's coming forward and alleging that after making an incredibly lopsided deal that I don't even know that much about deal making, but I would never enter into a deal with somebody who demanded 90% of a company to be involved with the deal. That's a deal breaker. But this guy says that they gave Trump 90% of the company in exchange for the use of his name and some minor involvement. And then he called and basically told this guy to sign over his shares to Melania, according to him. He asked Litinsky, would he give up some of his shares for Melania? And he responded, I can't do that because a gift to Melania would invoke a tax bill that he doesn't have the money to pay. That makes sense. See, this guy sounds like he's in a kind of a financial situation similar to me, where he might be involved in a company, but he can't just go throwing off, taxable
Right.
gifts like that. If this is true, Charles, this upsets
Yeah.
me more than any other allegation I've heard about Trump because it sounds very credible and it reminds me of the crappy things that a lot of assholes have tried to do to me in startup businesses.
Right. Well, let's
And it's
take a
bad.
step back here. Let's take a step back. This is a story that has appeared in MSNBC, in a bunch of other places, 3 weeks before the election. Maybe it's true. Maybe it's not. I don't think we need to. And here's this guy's mug plastered all over the internet. I think that the Trump social approach, I would argue, just at surface level, is a shit show. I mean, if
Yes.
you're really worth the kind of money that Trump may be worth, if it's not 10 billion, but let's say it's 6 or 3 or whatever the number is, you can afford to do this the intelligent way, which is not necessarily to hire a consultant, a firm like McKinsey or something, but to go and say, all right, look, we have Twitter, which has its pros and its cons. We have Facebook and its pros and its cons. We have various and sundry people arguing that we need a new thing. The one thing we definitely need is a vehicle that is not a cancel vehicle. And you've been kicked off, Mr. President. What would we need? Let's have a neutral third party go in and say, what do we need to do here to produce a robust and potentially viable competitor to these established platforms that have first mover advantage? What do we need to do? The last thing you would do is hang around with Adam Litinsky or whatever this guy's name is, who's some scam artist, in my view,
Oh, is
trying to
he?
put together probably this whole
What
scam,
about
this whole special access, whatever they're called, SPACs, these special purpose acquisition companies. That's scam.
yeah.
It's a scam. You don't need to
That's what
do it
I
that way.
thought.
The
It's like a
right way you
shell
do it,
company.
you don't need to do that if you're Donald Trump. I mean, what you do is you set up a real private company. You do it the way, if you want it to be a venture capital thing, you go out and you find people to put up real money. And there are plenty of people around the world who would have done this this is a scam approach. This is in an overheated market. People will, a SPAC, you're asking people to invest in a company that has not yet bought anything. That's that. I once convinced in my early 20s, Enron, actually, the company that became Enron, I forget the name of it, wanted to hire Dylan Reed to do something. And at the time, we had an arbitrage department which could have invested in the stock and made money. And the older people at Dylan Reed said, listen, Charles, what you need to do you brought this in. You need to tell this guy that if he wants us to get involved, he has to pay us $100,000. Internorth is the name of the company. Uh, they were. I got them to be a client in the early '80s, still on a transaction, and the argument was, I was told by my big bosses, you need to tell Internorth, and it might even, I forget, it might even have been one of the famous people, infamous people, in their youth in the '80s.
Kenneth Lay.
It might have been. I forget who it was exactly, but I told him, I said, listen, if you want us to be ready to work for you on Monday, this is on a Friday, you have to pay us $100,000 today. Okay. And I think my big bosses were just, let's see if Charles could pull this off. And I did. I got him to pay. And my argument was, we've got an arbitrage department who could invest in the stock on Friday. And if you're asking us, to shut that down, I need to be paid for that. And they did pay me, paid the firm. And so, nice. But the point is that's the similarity to these SPACs. A SPAC doesn't yet have an acquisition. I don't need to pay some schmuck for the privilege of maybe coming up with something that he might buy. I can buy, if I want to buy Emerson Electric, I'll buy it tomorrow morning. If I want to buy Exxon, you name it, I could buy any good company tomorrow that actually has a business. I don't need some promoter to reward some promoter with some crazy ass SPAC deal. And so SPACs in general are something that, I wouldn't have anything to do with, and it's just me. But if you're Trump, you don't need to do this, as it's far stronger to have reputable, hire a real law firm, not Michael Cohen or Jaime Manouche, and say to your kids, listen, you got the real estate empire. I built that for you. You can, you'll get that after I die. But on this social media stuff, you're not coming in here because you're my kid, getting a piece of it, right? I'm doing this. I've got this professional team. I'm not going to hire Devin Nunes to be a CEO. He knows nothing about this area. I'm going to hire somebody who knows what they're doing. I'm going to go work with a venture capital player who's got a reputation for putting companies together. And I'll put together a strong team in finance. I'll get somebody in the domain with experience, in marketing, in the domain with experience, management, in the domain with experience. That management team's going to put up real cash. I'll put up real cash. That's the way it would have to do it. So I have questions about this, but I'm very dubious about the timing of the story, where it's coming from. Maybe all this stuff happened the way it's being alleged in MSN. As a guess, there's probably not good news in this for Trump, but I'm not signing on to all the allegations as written in MSN yet.
I like that. And I also like it that you're explaining this SPAC, because when it first came up, I think just offline, I had asked you a casual question about it, and we didn't go into that much detail. But without really knowing anything about it, the reason why I was so suspicious of this from the beginning, not only because Devin Nunes is involved, and he is quite obviously an idiot, in my opinion, but there was a company that I became involved in when I lived in Los Angeles that had an idea that was, I thought, not good. But they weren't asking me for any money, and they had given me stock in their thing, and they were moving forward with this idea. And I said, look, I don't think this is the right way to do it, but if you're insistent on doing it, here is what I think you could do and should do. And I had stock in this company, and they were doing exactly this. I didn't know that it was called an SPAC, but they spoke about how they have these shell companies, and they're going to use that to acquire this legacy motion picture brand, and then they wanted to remake Rambo. And I was like, look, I'll take stock and consult with you on this and tell you what I think you should do to try to do that. But my first piece of advice was, don't do that. You're not going to be able to do that. And then they screwed me out of my stock and their thing. They were shysters, basically.
Right. So those are what are called story stocks, right? It's a story. Well, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And after I get done this in chapter 22, I'll do this and whatever.
Yes.
You don't need that, right? You go, as we've done, you go on to SEC Edgar. You punch in the ticker name of the company. You look at this 10K for starters. You look at its historical financial statements. You see, for the company, how big are the revenues? If there are no revenues, you stop wasting time on it. It's a dream. If their revenues, if they've been growing, if their profits after tax, there's cash flow, free cash flow, it's a significant percentage, 10% or more of revenues and growing. If it doesn't have much debt, if it's got a strong management team and a strong board, if you're comfortable with the risk, I mean, there's all sorts of things that you can actually buy that are, yes, there's stories involved, but there's also some hard numbers involved. And you could then say, well, what if the numbers are made up? And often there are too many cases where the numbers are made up. But SPACs in general, it's like saying I've got a great idea to finance, my children and grandchildren's futures. What I'm going to do is liquidate my IRA and invest every week in lottery tickets around the world. I mean, it's the same idea. SPACs, it's lottery.
How could
tickets.
that go wrong?
Right. Well, I'll start collecting. Yeah, I'll start collecting comic books or whatever. I mean, we're getting to horse racing. I mean, you could make money doing it, but it's speculating.
That's true. Well, thank you for that detailed explanation. I'm glad. I mean, I didn't know all the facts about that, but something stank about it to me. I think we're kind of close, unless there's anything else you wanted to discuss. Yeah, so I think we're sort of done for the day, Charles. That was an excellent presentation, and I think I have found the appropriate set of precautions and measures to navigate even the crappiest Wi-Fi. So that's pretty good. I mean, anytime there's a technical failure, or frankly, any kind of failure in life, Charles, I try to look at it as an opportunity to solve a problem. And I believe we've done that. So that's very good. And I want to thank all the viewer sponsors that make this show and the road trip and everything that I'm doing possible. If people are not yet sponsors, you may have missed last Friday's episode where John Cullen and I went to the Barringer meteor crater, and that is up there on Subscribestar and Patreon for people to enjoy. It was a really fun trip, and it's an amazing thing to behold. So if people haven't watched that yet, please make your way over to subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth or patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. Sponsor the show. Keep independent journalism going. Keep watching Charles, and help me be able to pay for this whole road trip. That would be excellent. Thanks to all the people who already sponsor. Huge thank you to you, Charles. And I hope everybody has a great remainder of their weekend, and I'll see everybody soon.
Very